when it starts thawing out, nicht einmal hat man schmecken. So ist ein gutes Stück Fleisch, nicht ein gutes Stück Fleisch. My father says, Zoglachai. He says, I'm Zoglachai. Thanks, Rabbi, so start the thawing out process. Nicht einmal, he says, the beginning to Tisch, ein gutes Stück Fleisch, nicht ein gutes Stück Fleisch. Sag's gut, sag's nicht gut. Wichtigkeit, nicht kein Wichtigkeit. Says things come more up, bisschen mehr. Sagen wir L'chaim. L'chaim, und fangen mit L'chaim. L'chaim. Support you Shvat, let's all say L'chaim together. L'chaim. So I wanna to tell you a medical the head in the first Farbrengen of the Rebbe, Shvat Tafshin Aleph, that the Rebbe said his mission statement. That the Rebbe said he wants to do a mission statement, but I want to introduce it. 4 years ago, a lady that was a big supporter of Technion, her parents were Fruma people in the 40s in America, and because of that, she had a gewisse Hergish for Frum, even though she was frei, she had a gewisse Hergish for Frum Meisters. So all the Frum Meisters in Massachusetts, they drawed money from her. She made a parlor dinner in her home in Cape Cod 4 years ago. And one of the Meisters that had to do with it was Chabad of Lexington. So I went down, and when they set up the dinner, they had tables of supporters to Technion, supporters to Hebrew University, and then he put all the frumies together. So I'm sitting there with the head of the Koilo and the head of by uns van Litvische Yeshivas. There's the Yeshiva, there's Beis Yaakov by us, there's Torah Academy by us, there's Modern Orthodox, there's Maimonides, Soloveitchik Yeshivas there. So Baruch Hashem, we have a whole slew of Orthodox representation in Boston, and everybody was at the table together with Fruma Rabboni. I'm not going to mention the name because it's not Limal Yussi, but he's a Nishkin Oyev Lubavitch, and we're sitting there, and I'm the einzige Lubavitcher of Zizdor. And he says, can I, and for the whole crowd, he's sitting across from me. He says, can I say a joke? Okay. There's 9 of us sitting around the table. Say a joke. He says, by alle von uns fallen Kinder, we're all losing children that are frying out. Let's see, he says, Lubavitcher verliebt Kinder, Lubavitch losing. Standing by an Orthodox, yeah, they ain't a Falib kid. What's the difference? I'm a Falib kid. So he says, let me tell you the difference. And this is a joke. He says, when a Litvish kid goes off the derech, nicht talking Shabbos, nicht talking Yom Tov, nicht talking Tefillin, nicht talking Kashrus, everything goes. A Lubavitch kid goes off the derech, same thing. Nicht talking Shabbos, nicht talking Yom Tov, nicht talking Tefillin, nicht talking. But the only difference is, he says, the Lubavitch kid that goes off the derech still has a period tefillin, because if he bumps into somebody that wants to put on tefillin, he has tefillin. And he starts laughing. And I'm sitting across the table. What did he just say? What did he just say? Was this the Malach? And he realized that I'm not with him. So there was an Erlich, the head of the Koilers, an Erlich. It's an Erlich, the head of the Koiler in Boston. Owes me a lot of favors. See, he says to me, he says, Alti, he meant it as a joke. Why are you, what? So I stood up. And I said, I want to repeat to you the mission statement that the Rebbe never used that expression again. The Rebbe used the expression one time. Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud Aleph, the Rebbe says, I'm making a mission statement. And the Rebbe quoted the famous Zoy. Yisrael, Kutshubuchu, Varaisa, Iskashro, and Zubazu. And the Rebbe went into the traditional interpretation that as a chada, because etzem kenish mischalik zayin, which by the way, the Rebbe said this same exact Zoyer, Chai Elo Tovshin Yud. A couple of months earlier, the Rebbe said it at Chai Elo Farbrengen. But the difference is that in the mission statement, the Rebbe added a new twist. Read it. It's not, this is possible. You can sit and read it. The Rebbe says, Jesus is a Yid get kummen. The Jew comes and says, I love God. Aber Yisrael and Torah weiß ich nicht. Tell him, as a hot nicht mit Eberstein. And then the Rebbe says, aber Eba Yid kommt to Zok, hot Avish Yisrael. Zog him as durch dem Avish Yisrael, he'll ultimately reach. Don't push him away. Why couldn't the Rebbe say that about Avos Hashem? As a Yid kommt to Zok dort Avos Hashem, zog him, a soft to soft, durch dem wird kommen zu Avish Yisrael und Avos Hashem. The Rebbe didn't say that. The Rebbe says, zog him, as a hot nicht Avish Hashem. When it came to Avish Yisrael, a Yid was hot nicht kein Sheiches to anything else. But he simply hot me by Yid. Don't push him away. I said, you just said a joke, which is the Rebbe's mission statement. And I sat down. To my surprise, the head of the Misnagdish Kollel in Boston, a Yid was Ken Len in a building, stands up. And he says, I want to follow Rabbi Bukiet. And I want to say a gro, a bir hagro at the table. I didn't expect this, you know what I mean? I thought, again, get a bir hagro here at the table. Who knows what he's going to come up with here? He says, Agro are one of the most famous Gemaras in Shas. The Ger was gekommen zu Hillel. Eerst lernen, kol ha-teire kula al regelach. Fragt the Grove, what's Pshat? What's the regelach? Listen to the Pshat of the Grove. I actually looked it up afterwards. The Rosh HaKollel said it verbatim. The Grove says like this. The Ger hat got a poshet to child. Simple question. Me geht da rein in goals. Churban bias is going to happen. They saw the writing on the wall. Fragte by Hillel, a poshet to child. So 3 regels. So 3 feasts. The Grove doesn't quote the Zohar. The Grove quotes the first Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Ala Torah, ala Avoda, Val Gemilas Chasod, which is the same 3 regels, by the way. Torah, Skashus Telmeivish Avoda, Avish Yisrael Gemilas Chasod. When the Grove says that the convert, the gate, asks Hillel, if we go into Golus and there's only one regel to stand on, which of those 3 regels should we emphasize? When emphasis Hillel, Madaloch Sani Lachaver Chalisabet, Avish Yisrael. And then it goes on to say, oh, but durch dem geht in Zukunft zu liebe der Teure. You know, exactly what the Rebbe said. And I was sitting at this meeting, and it was interesting. The guy who said the joke didn't retract of the Rebbe's mission. He was dispelled that the Vilna Gaon said something. He says, he said, I believe nicht the Vilna Gaon, because of Zaza. He never heard that Vilna Gaon. So the Rosh HaKollel, his name is Rabbi Beer. Because look, it's on Masechta Shabbos, he says. Open up the Bir Hagra on Masechta Shabbos. It's Yishri. So I want to tell a mice, which I witnessed. I was just the Rebbe, I was just Shliach for 3 years as a Bukiet to Florida, from Lametes to Mem Aleph. Mem Beis, we came back to 770, and Pesach Mem Beis, the Rebbe was Mediyah, the whole Kvutza that went to Florida, that they're opening up a new yeshiva in London, and that you're going to be shluchim to London. So that summer Mem Beis, a couple of us wrote into the Rebbe saying, we just came back from 3 years. You're sending us for another year to London. Can we stay with you? No camps and no American shlichus. Can we sitzen in 770 this summer? We bet in the shus. And the Rebbe answered us a beautiful thing. The Rebbe answered us, the skabel, teven noch in the skabel askarality. Stay. And 3 of us stayed the whole summer Mem Beis in the 770. It was a very dicke summer for us. First of all, Crown Heights clears out, 770 clears out. Talking about your posture davening with the Rebbe. Those days the Rebbe didn't go down every day, but the 2 Mondays and Thursdays, you posture 11 people davening shachas with the Rebbe. Mincha at 3:15 was 12, 13 people. The Rebbe saw you every day, and then they gave us the honor that on Shabbos morning to walk the Rebbe and Friday night to walk the Rebbe. So some of us walked the Rebbe Friday night. I ended up walking the Rebbe for 11 weeks every Shabbos morning. From his house. At 8:15 in the morning, we would be there by 7:30. Around 8:15, the Rebbe would come out and start walking to 770. And the Rebbe didn't Farbrengen beside Shabbos Mevorchim. So out of 11 weeks, there was 2 Shabbos Mevorchim. 9 of the weeks was Poshit, the neighborhood was empty. And the Rebbe, it was reich on bread. The Rebbe would walk slow, and the Rebbe got to know us. So sometimes the Rebbe got ahead of the traffic and crossed over Brooklyn by Eastern Parkway, and we didn't make it. So the Rebbe would stand and wait until the traffic moved. And when the Rebbe saw that the traffic moved, he started to walk, because then he knew we were behind him. It was unbelievable to watch how the Rebbe. I don't know his name. Don't ask me a name. Out of the corner of our eye, we used to see him come out of the train station. He would open the door Shabbos morning for the Rebbe. The Rebbe would give him a shmeichel. The Rebbe's shmeichel would start at the bottom of the steps. As soon as the Rebbe saw him standing there, and the Rebbe's shmeichel, and he would say good Shabbos to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would go in. And this is like 11 weeks in a row. I asked Label Grom says in the winter he doesn't come, he comes in the summer. This is a shame. He says it's going on for years. Okay. One Shabbos, me and my Chava, we're mamish, like the Rebbe comes to turn up the steps to go up to 770, and we're like by the library, like a house apart. And as the Rebbe turned up to go to steps, we saw that standing next to this man, an elderly Yid that was a little bit unsettled. And I looked at so we got closer and we recognized him. I mean, the Rosh Hashiva would know. He was a Rosh Hashiva, Churgin. Didn't have the greatest marriage. Like drinking Masak. He was a starker. He's one of the only people that died in 770, by the way. There are a couple of people that died mamish in 770. Itche Churgin died in 770. That's chus. But again, I like drinking. And again, I started. It was very strong. And I say to the guy I'm walking with, I say, Itche Churgin doesn't look like he's entirely as a bissel wackelt, this. And the Rebbe is coming up the stairs. And so we ran to figure out, what are we going to do to this guy? This guy can beat me to a pulp. I mean, it's not He's not a weak guy. I was a little skinny guy weighing 110 pounds. This guy was a Russian Cossack. You know what I mean? What can I do with this guy? But at least I didn't want him to interfere with the Rebbe. But it was too late. The door got open, and the Rebbe walked in. That evil left, and now the Rebbe is walking towards his door, and the Rebbe had a bendel. And on the bendel, the Rebbe had two keys. One was to the door into Gan Eden HaTachten, and one was to the door into his room. The Shabbosim that we witnessed the Rebbe do this, it was perfect. He knew exactly the key that went into the door to open a Gan Eden HaTachten. He knew exactly the key that went in to open up the Gan Eden El. It opened up the door to the room. He never had a problem. But Itchachurgin is standing there, and the Rebbe is trying to get the key into the door, and for some reason, the Rebbe, it's an anger action. This is the key, and it was the wrong key. He was putting the key to his room to open up the door, and the Rebbe was standing like this and trying, and Itchachurgin had an opportunity. And he says to the Rebbe, "Kennst du hier, was öffnet die Tür?" You know the Jews opening the door for you? And the Rebbe, still. The Rebbe keeps on trying. It's almost like I wanted to walk over and tell the Rebbe, let's switch keys. You're working with the wrong key. And the Rebbe didn't stop. The Rebbe kept on trying to open the door. And Itchachurgin repeats himself. Rebbe, kennst du hier, was öffnet die Tür für dir? The Rebbe's quiet. The Rebbe recognized that Itchachurgin is a bissel, you know. And then the Rebbe flipped keys and dropped the key he was working with and took the other key, put it in, and the door opened. And as the door opened and the Rebbe walked into the room, the Rebbe turned to Itchachurgin. One line was Artir as zwei Eden lieben sich. What does it bother you that two Jews love each other and closed the door and said good Shabbos? That was the whole thing. You're focusing on a negative. Don't focus on the negative. The reality is that there is a connection that I'm having with him at that moment, and divorce it from the whole bigger picture. So anyways, I was telling Rabbi Yoel, I ate that Shabbos afternoon by Rabbi Yoel. Who else was in Crown Heights besides Rabbi Yoel Khan and Leiben Kroner? Pick the two houses you can go eat by. Everybody else was out of town, so we ate by Rabbi Yoel. So I'm repeating to Rabbi Yoel the story that happened. Well, I just saw Rabbi Yoel's listening. So Rabbi Yoel says to me, he says, Alti. He says, it's gemol gehet von Avram Kaliske. Avram Kaliske, who hat nicht gehet von Avram Kaliske? The Alte Rebbe is a chosser. Avram Kaliske, and the Alte Rebbe is one of the big Talmid of the Alte Rebbe, Avram Kaliske. So Yoel starts laughing. Nishen Avram Kaliske. I'm not talking about the Alte Rebbe's chosser. I said, there's another person by the name of Avram Kaliske? Who would give a person who's, I never heard a family by the name of Kaliske. He says, nah, this is Shema Mushal, but this is a borrowed name. I said, who gave him the name? He says, oh, it's Alangamais. He says, but I want to tell you, he says, we're going to have Avram Kaliske. So again, he says there was a Seicher, the Frierdiker Rebbe. Yoel says, I don't even remember his real name. What the guy's name is. The Frierdiker Rebbe called him Meiner HaSeicher. And then, for some reason, the Bochum started to call him Avram Kaliske. He wasn't a frum Jew. He used to come to the Frierdiker Rebbe's Farbrengens in the year with the parties in the middle of the weekdays, but sometimes he even came Shabbos, and they knew he was coming by trade. Frierdiker Rebbe is weg. And Tovshin the base, Simchas Torah, Rosh Hashanah, he showed up with keys by the Rebbe. And everybody knew that he showed up with keys. He got out of the train station. He came and listened to keys, and he left after the keys. Yitzchak Grona was then going on Shlichus after Simchas Torah. He was going on Shlichus to Buffalo. Yitzchak Grona, after Hakofis, the second night, Crown Heights then was a beautiful neighborhood. And from other shuls used to roll in after their Hakofis. They knew 770 was the latest Hakofis. Yitzchak Grona could do a sach mashki. Because I get the Shlichus, you know what I mean? So, und er hat sich weggestellt auf den Tisch und angefangen zu schreien. Als Avram Kalaskis, Kiyash Heaven, Kiyash Schäfer, ist noch größer wie Kotler und Lake. Was ist das geschehen? Und he didn't let go of the line. That Avram Kalaskis, Kiyash Schäfer. Then fremde Yidden that came in from other, and they see this Yitzchak Grona. We're talking about 6'5" and kleine Hotter and a booming voice. So 770 was Sachako, just not even the size of this room. And you got Yitzchak Grona on top of a table, Shreit Koilus of Rockin, as a wrong Kaliskis Kiyas. He's not aggressive in Kotler and Lake. We need it from the Balabatish Yidden that had a child learning in Lakewood. His child calls up to ask him if the Yontiv is given. He tells his child, you know what was going on Simchas Torah by night in 770? This is a new Shliach going out to Buffalo. When I gestanden from Tishing geschrien, as a run Kalaskis Kies is not aggressive. This Bacher, Tamavata the next morning walks over to Kotler, Aaron Kotler. Remind me. I got to tell you a story about Aaron Kotler and Shvat. Just remember that. He walks over to Aaron Kotler and says to him, in 770, hat mir gesagt, a Meister, a freie that comes by train, as sein head in Kies, and Rosh Hashanah is not aggressive for dein Kies. And Kotler heard this as a gang of Meshuggah. That's what the Hakofis in 770 is about. He quickly called up the Rashag. Calls up the Rashag and he says to the Rashag, what's this? Wie kommt der Bochner soll so reden? Bezoin of Torah, bezoin of Yeshiva. He wants an apology. The Rashag calls in Shmulevitten and calls in my father, who then, this is before Mentor became Rosh Hashiva in 770 in Tezvav. My father was from Tavshin Yud through Tavshin Tezvav. My father was in 770. And then the Rebbe in Tezvav said to my father, Yechidus, it's a met pasik as Mentor soll sein mit the elder Boch, and you go to the Mesifta. And the Rebbe flipped that, their jobs. Called him my father, they called him Shmuel Witten was the Shpia. The Rashak says, this is no good. I can't have such bad public relations. So Shmuel Witten calls in Grona and says to Rabbi Grona, before you go to Buffalo, I think you got to go to Lake. Push, you got the Mechil. And Grona looks at him and says, I'm taking out a half a day of my time to go drive to Lakewood to go ask Mechila. I was drunk. What's this? They couldn't be pearled him, so that shot called in Grona and said to the Mus game. This can't blow up, Rabbi. Yitzhak Grona, like, he didn't. And he had Yechidus the next night with the Rebbe. Before he's going to Buffalo. He goes into Yechidus to the Rebbe. This is Yoel telling me. Says, I get there any Yechidus. And before the Rebbe looks at his temple, the Rebbe says to him, Ich hear, als dein Welt haben the Griechen heiche Fenster. And the Rebbe is saying with a Shemeichel, I hear that your words with the Griechen heiche Fenster. And the Rebbe said, hab's du gut gesagt? Hab's du gut gesagt? And that was, it was over. Avis Yisrael of the Rebbe, that be able to look at a Jew. Ich habe lieb a zweite Jid, und ich halt noch nicht. Don't let go. Don't let go. So Yel said to me, I want to tell you something. He says, you're not allowed to tell such stories because the world can't understand. The world, I'm not killing for this, he says. But he says, you should know that Avram Kaliska in Tovshin Tezvov came to Farbrengen of the Rebbe. And this is after 5 years coming to the Rebbe. And at the Farbrengen, the Rebbe turned to him. And he was said L'chaim. And he came up to the Rebbe. Because the Rebbe made with his hand. And he came up to the Rebbe said to him, Leg the Shliach. Put your keys on the table. And he never drove again. He became a Frumiyid. It took its time. That when the Rebbe finally had a durkar with them, in that relationship, that the Rebbe then 5 years later looked at him at a Farbrengen and said to him, Leg the Shliach. And he never drove it. Ob it's schon geheben, like the Rebbe's mission statement. Avis Yisrael. Zwei Jiden haben sich lieb. Eine von der was hat lieb ist noch nicht. Don't worry about it. You'll get there. And to my muzzle, I found out that the gross says it as well. No. Das kann ich kaum machen. L'chaim. Pull the chair. So as long as I have the Rosh Yeshiva sitting here, I don't know how long we'll sit here for my Narishkeit. But as long as I have the Rosh Yeshiva sitting here, I want to chazah something that Efshir, you'll help me. Efshir will help me find the book. Okay? Had a mice. I got a wilde mice. My Shver, 5-ish Vogel from London, was very involved with the Svarim. There's like 8 Svarim that were in London. By Said, they were in libraries. And there's a guy by the name of Jack Lungser, who was a buyer of books, Edgar Svarim. And they were going to put under from Yidden that had Svarim, that the Rebbe genutzt them to get those Svarim. Interessant, nice, because the Rebbe wanted to have a role. Okay, the Rebbe wanted a role, so chasmin on all the transactions. And if the Rav chasmin at this time it would cost the safer, so by Shver, gefragt by Rebbe, London is doch full of Rabbon. You have the United Synagogue. The chief rabbi then was not Jonathan Sachs, was Jacobowitz. The Rebbe hat herabgeschrieben an Namen von einer ungarischen Rolle. Padre. Dein Padre. Satan. Soll sein der Rolle. Anyway. Ich bin ein Shliach damals in Florida. As you come, it came the morning of Haytavis. One of the lawyers had aufgekommen mein Schwer. This is 8 o'clock in the morning. Und gesagt, mein Schwer, hör sich zu. Something's happening big. Get on a plane. Get on the first plane, komm leif. My Schwer said, is it good or bad? He says, the feeling I'm getting, it's good. So Tavis Lubavitch, get on a plane. So my Schwer, the first thing he did was call all his children. And said, we're all shluchim. My brother-in-law's in Texas, Manny Dabrowski. At Alaman said, get on a plane. He calls me in Florida, it's 8:39 in the morning, and says, get on a plane. Well, Sarasota has no planes, you know what I mean? So I have to, without getting to Tampa, a 2-hour drive. Unking Tvillin, Unking Gat is gone. I get in a car. I thought I'm going for 3 hours. I ain't getting a race. So I bought a ticket, a 12 o'clock ticket, and I bought a 9 o'clock ticket back. 12 o'clock, I get on a plane. There's no phones, there's no nothing, you know what I mean? No cell phones, no nothing. The plane lands at 2:30. I get in a taxi. The taxi pulls up in front of the 770 5 minutes after 3. By then, the Ulam went in already inside downstairs. Well, by then, label told that. But so when I got out of the taxi, in my cup, who died into that upstairs? So I went upstairs. I didn't know anything. I saw these bottles of mashkas lying. With a cup of mashke. The ganze Ulam is reingelaufen. Happen Plätze. The Rebbe's coming down. I walk out of a taxi. There's a lady in the racing. I go up the steps to 770, and you know, with the display of Merkis Svarim, right by Kumacharan. Steht da hier. He's 80 years old. Not 80, 75 years old. On a yarmulke. Und weint. You know, at the end of the day, the Shliach, we said that each state in vain. So I first thing I did is took the yarmulke off my own, like to my yarmulke. And I say, hi, my name is Bukiet. He says, my name is Farbrengen. I say, why are you crying? He says, my wife is in the hospital with cancer. And the doctors gave up. And one of them was an Orthodox doctor that said, the medical way is over. Go the spiritual way. And go, there's a Rabbi. So I said, you know, the Rebbe is about to walk out. I pointed to the door. And as I'm pointing to the door, the door opens, and the label Groner opens the door, and the Rebbe comes out. Steht und weint. You know, he had tears. His nose was running. The Rebbe comes walking out. And the Rebbe gibt a guck. Steht da etwas weint. So he says to me in Yiddish, was ist? Farbrengen didn't speak a word of Yiddish. So I say to them Yiddish, the Weib is nicht gesund. Und kommt Farbrengen. That his wife is not well, he's coming for Farbrengen. So the Rebbe says to me, was ist Ihr Name? So I turn to Farbrengen and I say, Farbrengen, what's your wife's name and what's her mother's name? The Rebbe heard it. I didn't have to do a translation. The Rebbe heard. The Rebbe was quiet. It felt like a minute, but it wasn't a minute. Maybe a couple of seconds. Maybe not even that. The Rebbe says, Zogem, do yorim famir, zichir do yorim fa'ir. With a shmeichel. So I translate. The Rebbe said that God has years for him. For sure he has years for her. And the Rebbe puts his hand in the kapota and takes out a nickel. And gives him the nickel, and the Rebbe points to the pushka. And the Rebbe watched him walk to the pushka and put the nickel in the pushka, and then he came walking back, and then the Rebbe turned to get into the elevator. And as the Rebbe turned to get into the elevator, the Yaman was on one side, label was on the other, and the label was starting to close the door, and all of a sudden the Rebbe says, Bukiet nu. You know, I was zeker to have a yechidus without going to a mikveh. But middle Bukiet nu. Frozen. So the Rebbe says, "Hat they gelegt tefillin?" So I turn to him and I say, "Farbrengen, have you put on tefillin?" He says, "I haven't put on tefillin since my bar mitzvah." So the Rebbe says, "Bring him up to the tefillin." I took him downstairs. I put him on tefillin. The violet, it took me. I missed the whole secret of that. I put him on tefillin. I walked him outside. I went into Merkis to get him a taxi. By the time I put him in the taxi and I can go downstairs, the sikh was over. The next day, the Rebbe said to collect signatures. Yeah? I had a car. By then, I rented a car. I got a car. And my father, with Rabbi Yoel and Yossel Weinberg, asked me a favor. They want to go collect signatures. Everybody's collecting signatures. The Rebbe wants signatures. And they said they want to go to Baruch. Also, from Eden. Because no, the Rebbe said get people's names. Oh, names. Shemam v'shem imam. So they said they want to go to Baruch. It made sense. The guy Yidden was can't read in English. So on the way driving, my father tells Yoel the story of Farbrengen. And Yoel, this is why I need because I never found the mock. Yoel fängt on the pontificating. How do you say pontificating in English? In Yiddish. Er hat angefangen mit auföffnen die ganze Meise. And fängt an also, it says, as a dawn haloche, the gedde von a Yochid Nazi. He says that Rab Chaim salvation. The Grach, he says, as kocht sich, as the Geder von der Jochen nach Zibur, is as the Zibur bleibt Yechidim. As a Reichkeit that you have 10 Yechidim. Aber es nicht kein Eier Geder. Then he says, da Ragitschov. Was der Ragitschov kocht sich, Pumfake. As Zibur, it's a Naye Metzies. It's Yechidim. He says, da sich for Rebbe, was the Rebbe will pay. Was the Rebbe argues that there's a Zibur, und es a Naye Metzies, und von deswegen bleibt die Jochen euch am Metzies. Doesn't Jochen, the Rebbe says, and he'll say, oh, that, he says, this is what just happened. The Rebbe is the mitna meise von a Zibur. So it's about, the Rebbe's Messias is about the whole about. The kocht sich am meise von a Zibur, that you couldn't get a greater story of a Zibur. And the Rebbe is about to go down to Mincha, with the ganze Elam steht, und wart Herren Heitevis, und was kann der Rebbe sich vernehmen mit? A Joch. Abgeben Zeit, a simple Jew, with his issue. Und it didn't get lost in the Zibur. And that's Chazif HaKoch, the whole idea. So let me tell you the end of the story. I dropped them off. On 13th and 53rd. And my father stood on one corner, Yosef Weinberg stood on another corner. And I went to Farbrengen. I told them I'll pick them up in 2 hours. 2 hours later, I come back. My father has names, Yosef Weinberg has names, Gail has names. And Yosef Weinberg sits down in the car. He says, he says, I'm going to tell you what happened to me. He says, the vision is to Rosh Yeshiva is a door. Walking home after Zman, and I approached him and I asked him for his signature. He says, my famous signature. So he looked at what's out to give a signature. Look, stripe the mom and give me the mom's name, the top of the mom. No, my famous. He says, it's a famous Ram to Rebbe. So he says, what's the famous Ram to Rebbe? He says, the Alter Rebbe, I feel nicht close to Pantoffel, reinfallen by the he said, the Alter Rebbe didn't allow that his slippers should chas v'sholem. He says, the Rebbe gets my name? Farfal. He says, Farfal, he says. The famous. Anyways, Yosef Weinberg came over to my father a couple of days later. He says, I want to tell you, ich habe reingeschrieben zum Rebbe, the ganze Teure für Yale, because it was a half an hour, very a geschmacke, a ganze Rayoni, Yochid, Zipur, the Rebbe's Yochid. And ich habe reingeschrieben zum Rebbe, the Meister von der Vision zu Rosh Yeshiva. He says, if you understand it, Rebbe was the Meister von der Rosh Yeshiva. The Rebbe answered, ask it out, see it. That I'm gonna tell him the George. The vision to Rosh Yeshiva is gonna be on the CNO. Ask it out, see it. He said, that's a yells after. The Rebbe was didn't respond to the whole thing. I never found the Sikh of the Rebbe, where the Rebbe speaks about that in Sibur. And I always meant to ask you, because it's da? Bakera. Oh, in Chav Gimel, as I'm looking at the Sikh. In Laban Gimel. Okay. I didn't know. Okay. That's good. It's Keda, yeah. Current piece of Keda. It was a Yochid and there's a Tzibur. Yeah. Okay, Chazit. The Rebbe was going to the oil. The Rebbe said, whoever gives it, it's a Eish Rotzen that the name should go to the oil. This is the day after the whole story. Hey, Tavis Tavshin Mem Zayin. The Rebbe said then, it's a Eish Rotzen, and they were running up to the Rebbe and pushing names. Yeah, so everybody ran to get people's names. So they went, there were people that stood in Farbrengen. But they went to Borough Park because from the Eden, it's easy for them to. L'chaim. Huh? Okay, I'll get you. L'chaim. It's a tale to the whole story. Pesach open. I want to tell you, on the way we were driving back from the signatures, and we got stuck in traffic. L'chaim. So, anyways, my father had 60 signatures. Yo had 50 signatures. Yossel Weinberg had 15 signatures. So, ich still a younger kid, what am I, 26 years old. Aber mein Papa ist doch gewesen Rabbi für Yosef Weinberg. Hat gestochen. 2 hours, 15 signatures. My high. And the Rebbe wants names. 2 sure, 7 signatures an hour was. And these were old Chabenim from a thought from Shanghai. And part of the jokes always was that Yosef Weinberg is a Bible so the father spoke to father saying to him, Yosef, stop us the Sachgire. So he says, he says, the Vishnitzer hat mir erzählt der Meister. And I wanted to know every plot of the Meister. Because the Vishnitzer, he didn't give a signature, but he said to Yosef Weinberg, he says, I'm not giving the signature about a chob, an unbelievable hadras kovet zum Rebbe. I know what's I and I don't want to join this thing. Was verstehst? Ich said, I'm not saying it. Ich sage es nicht nach schlechten Elfen. He says, ich sage es wrong. So Yosef was arguing with him. Then finally he says, ich will dir erzählen my mice. He says, I'll show you my derech to the Rebbe. Ich will dir erzählen my mice. He says, mein Tate given a chosid from Chaim Hager. Chaim Hager was today's the 2 grandchildren by visions. Then it was Moshe. Moshe's father was Chaim Meir. He was the one who survived the Holocaust. He was nifter in Lamed Beis. Lamed Beis. Chaim Meir Hager. He was a very deheuben Yid. In Chof Ches, the Satama, went up to Eretz Yisrael. There was kindness why he's going, because he's going to see the Kaisel, so he finished didn't go see the Kaisel. But he went to Eretz Yisrael, fundraising, etc. He came to Eretz Yisrael and he went to see Chaim Meir Hager. This is the vision of Tzachosed telling Yosef Weinberg. And Yosef Weinberg wrote this to the Rebbe as well. He went to Hager, to the vision of Rebbe, and he said to the vision of Rebbe, vision of they're part of that whole Romanian, Hungarian, they're not the Polish Siddists, they're not the Russian Siddists. They're crazy. This is a hot time to see. For what lost mir allein schlagen sich mit? Why am I the only one fighting it? Ich schlug sich Feierabend. Er ist doch erzählt. He says, was tut das denn mit der Gisro, mit meistens? He says, for was bin ich der Einzige? Was schlagt sich mir? So Chaim Meir Hager hat sich vertracht. And he said, start Meister from the Beis Yosef. This is how he starts out. He says, start Meister from the Beis Yosef. It's a famous story of the Beis Yosef. And I heard of it, they got shot in the murder. And Sof Kol Sof, he got to, it's a kumsum the pshat. And then he was walking to shul at the head of Malamed in the Cheder. Hat gesagt the pshat mit Abschitis without any Haravanya. He was very arogefallen by it. He said something to the Arizal. And the Arizal said to him, you are mamshech lamata, and once you are mamshech lamata, our chemist on the shelf. He said, the Rebbe, mit seiner Avish Yisrael, geht sich schlagen die ganze Welt. Und es geht auch Harvanya sein. Aber geht es mamshech sein lamata. Und nachdem es mamshech lamata, wird man alle noch. Von wo soll es sich schlagen? That's what he said to the Satan. And the vision says to Yosef Weinberg, the Heshes mein Rebbe gesagt gemeint. He compared him to the Beis Yosef. Das ist the Beis Yosef aufgedauert und gemacht. Your Rebbe is going to change the world in Avish Yisrael. Und mir geht sich alles schlagen. Aber Sof geht auch durch. Und mein Rebbe gesagt, was soll sein für die Beschwörung? So I know exactly who he is. I'm not giving you the signature. That was the Maisa. He wrote that Maisa into the Rebbe. Part of the whole thing. And on that Maisa, the Rebbe put a question mark. He didn't, Rebbe, I said, you can follow all the details. The Rebbe didn't like his tactic. So Yosef said, I don't know what the question mark was, but this is the Maisa, was the vision itself. That was on the Nishkeb and the thing, but on the Maisa, the vision itself, they put a question mark. I didn't know. Anyways. My father had a shaykhs with Lakewood. There was one of the major operators in Lakewood was a balabas. His parents were balabatim of my father. Krasansky. My father used to tell an unbelievable mice. Issa Zalman Meltzer, the Slutsky Rosh Yeshiva in Slutsk, was Eilel Eretz Yisrael in the 30s. Got out of Russia in the 30s. Communism. But he didn't run to Poland like a lot of Misnagdish yeshivas ran to Poland. He made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. Issa Zalman Meltzer was Aaron Kotler's Shvat. If that's the family, then the family. Basically, I don't know. But his Slutsk was one of the Litvish yeshivas in Russia, what was unbelievable. He moved. He lived a block away from the Slonim Rebbe. Fleckter a durchgehen, Shabbos, Freitag by Nacht. He used to go to the Ashkenazic shul, but then as he walked home, in Slonim Beis HaMedrash hat man gedauert später wie bei der Litwische Beis HaMedrash. And he used to stand outside and hear Smidus. And I don't know gehabt für das Smidus. And then Amol hat sich hereingehappen zu the Tisch. And he took up a Yedidus with the Slonim Rebbe. In his later life, the Slutsky Rosh Yeshiva hat gehabt a Shaykhus mit a Chassidische Rebbe, the Slonim Rebbe. His Aiden from America came to visit him for a Yom Tov. Rabbi couple. And Rabbi walked with him to shul. And then Rabbi walked home. And his shver came a half an hour late. And we sitzen wart for the shver doesn't show up for half an hour. So when Isazal Meltzer came in, so Rabbi asked him, where were you? Who was to give in? He says, durch the Tisch by the Slonim Beis HaMedrash. Mit gesagt reingehabt, the Slonim Beis HaMedrash. Rabbi says to him, Sluts, like calling upon history. Sluts. Wie kommst du sitzen bei Slonim Tisch? And he says, Zalman Meltzer got quiet. And he looked at him and he said, Rabbi, wenn es kommt zu Rambam und du dickst dich mit mir, darf ich helfen. Comes to Rambam and you're arguing with me, I have to listen. Weil ein Seichel verstehen dem Rambam, erst bist du gerecht. Als er kommt zu mir schon, muss schweigen. Es kommt zu mir schon, muss schweigen. My father always used to repeat this story. As I feel like Slutsky Rosh Yeshiva, hat verstanden, the Reichkeit von Chassidut. That they have the touch, the soulful touch. And if they have that soulful touch, but you can zog in the Rosh Yeshiva from Lakewood, Es kommt zu Rambam, kannst du sich mit mir dingen. Aber ding sich nicht mit mir, es kommt zu einer Chance. That's the story. As I was talking, you should know that from this person, it was no one in Lakewood. People in Lakewood told me. Rabbi Aaron wasn't embarrassed to tell the story. He would tell the story about himself in the Shliach, and he heard it from Rabbi. And your Rosh Hashiva is sitting quiet as a still hate. You're allowed to do this. You're allowed to get an arm of us. Chaim.
So you were classmates of mine.
How old are you?
I'm 60.
What's that? 60. You're 60? I'm 62. So we're 2 years apart. You might have known me, but I wasn't a classmate. You were 2 years younger than me. Right? L'chaim.
So you were Rabbi Bukiet's son.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
So I remember your name.
In the Sifta was Rabbi Marlowe, Rabbi Garfunkel, Rabbi Shvain, Rabbi Ushbal, and then my father. And Rabbi Goldman was 8th grade, Rabbi Eckhouse was 7th grade, Rabbi Fuchs was 6th grade, Rabbi Barnetsky was 5th grade, Rabbi Kolodny was 3rd grade. I can't hear you. So I want to tell you, the first time I was in the Haven was Tufshin Memdala. 1984, I was in the Haven. My Shvagi was a teacher here for Rabbi Heck. Mendy Dubrovsky was a teacher here in New Haven. And Memdala, we came to visit. I was newly married, and I came to visit Rabbi Mendy Dubrovsky in New Haven. And Rebbetzin Hecht, who's a Krinsky, there was a yard site for her. It was the yard site for her father, or her mother, and so there was a Mlava Malka in their house. And I came to the Mlava Malka, and I'll never forget it. Rabbi Moshe Hecht sits by the Mlava Malka. Rabbi Moshe Hecht says, I want to tell you a story about the passing, and I think it was the mother in Tofshin Chav Gimel. That was the yard site from Tofshin Chav Gimel. But he says, I want to introduce the story with he says I'm ich lerne it. He says, I'm learning. Yeah, I want to introduce you with the Inyan in Nigla. So I thought, oh no, here we go. I'm just newly married. But he says, I'm not going to say about it. I'm going to tell you a Maisa Nigla, a Maisa. What's the Maisa? He says the Ragachova's wife became sick, and they flew her to Vienna, and she passed away in Vienna. So the Ragachova had to travel to Vienna because she was buried in Vienna. As he got on the train to travel, and by the time he arrived in Vienna, there was a group of people sitting around him, and he was the train is in Vienna, and they're waiting to do the kvura. But the Ragachova sits on the train and is started blood. He finally finishes, and the kvura was done 5 hours after the zman that they were conveyed the kvura. And during Shiva, they asked the Ragachova. Somebody asked him, you're supposed to be mafsik Talmud Torah for the sames. So the Ragachova get tiny demos that if Torah and you are one thing, then there's no hefsek. You can't be mafsik. So no, Divas Torah is not a one demo kvur. A mensch was Torah, you munose is ein zar. You don't be mafsik. That was his time. We all listen to a beautiful story. And then he begins. So I'm ready to take a Maisa from the Rebbe. The Rebbe asked him and his wife in Tofshin Chav Gimel, they were already in New Haven, that the Rebbe wanted them to go to South American countries together. Go to Brazil, go to how you call it, Colombia, and helping Tom with the Shliach, helping. And in the middle of them being there, Rebbetzin Hecht's mother passes away. Yudel's, Krinsky's mother. So the Rebbe says to Rabbi Yudel, call up your sister that she should come back for Shiva. By the way, I asked Rabbi Yudel, and Rabbi Yudel said, my brother-in-law told a story. Perfect. The day after Shidva, Yudel is driving the Rebbe to the oil. And as Yudel's driving, the Rebbe is sitting, and he's looking at papers, and he starts speaking to himself loud enough that Yudel should hear. Was soll diese geheißen zurückkommen und verwehrt? Ist doch gewinn nicht Shlichus. Wir wollten sein später. Rebbe saying, was? They want Shlichus. Was soll mafse gewinn die Shlichus verwehrt? And the Rebbe, and he's not talking to Yudel. He says he wasn't talking to him. He's talking to himself, loud enough that I should hear. And Rabbi Moshe Hecht, was sitting at this table at the Rav to say to the Rebbe, just like to the Ragatrov, if you're one with something, Tavelis doesn't push it away. So the Rebbe was, if you're one with his inyonim, the Rebbe was like questioning himself. Why did I ask him to come back? And the Rebbe made with his hand and then kept on the page. And Yudel said he never mentioned it again to him. And Moshe Hecht, that was my first time I met Moshe Hecht, was Mem Daled at this Mlava Malka. There was a Mlava Malka for the yard site of this lady. And he told a story about Chav Gimel, that they flew in for the Levaya. And what the Rebbe, and he Farbrengen the whole night. Huh? Yeah, Brady could come to. And Rabbi was Farbrengen the whole night. He said, at the hair from the Rebbe. It was like, I was a young guy. I didn't get got on Shlichus. I'm watching this Eid. Farbrengen about a heritage. It was very eye-opening to hear him speak the way he spoke. Farbrengen beautifully the whole night about the Rebbe's belief in Shlichus. And what the Rebbe believes that you nasatzim with you become one, but even a shaila, if a vela so stup. Was all vela so stup. That was my first time in New Haven. I came back to New Haven. I said, wow. What a word to hear. You go to the Haven. To me was like Timbuktu. I didn't know what the Haven was about, but it was like the head of Chassidish Yid and a Mlava Malka. Farbrengen verbracht. It was an eye opener for me. It was an eye opener to hear a heritage. Anyways, I just wanted to share it with you. Just tell you this is you should know. Ayid Kata Hergish wegen seines Kashrus mit der. Anyways, L'chaim.
I didn't remember you. I remember you.
You're not gonna let go, but you're not gonna let go. Okay. See what happens when I start drinking. I go back to my natural eating. I want to tell you, these are stories that you'll never hear. But it's Pashit the Dihavuvda. The Rosh Hashiva wanted to tell one story. Before I tell what Rosh Hashiva wants me to tell, I want to talk to you about the Rebbe for a second. That I had a personal experience that Pashit, it's when we were shluchim in Florida for Lamed Testament days, we weren't allowed to come in for Yom Tov. There was no coming in for Tishrei. Yeah, Miami Beach. Yeah, Alton, 11th and Alton. You weren't allowed to come in for, there's no coming in for Tishrei, there's no coming in for Pesach, none of that stuff. You were it's eingebettet, the Rebbe, that Zecher Begedel Yud Shvat, Zecher Begedel Alf Nissen, Zecher Begedel Yud Beis Tammuz. Sachakol, that was the Daled Nissen Memalad was Birkas Hacham. About Eingeschrieben zu Rebbe, a wilde Sache, like we were shocked. But Eingeschrieben zu Rebbe, it's a Birkas Hacham. Can we come in for Birkas Hacham? And the Rebbe let the entire group come in for Birkas Hacham, but tonight, they were not even there for your office. We all got to go back after Birkas Hacham. The night of Birkas Hacham, there was a guy by the name of Yaakov Goldstein. He married Weberman's daughter. There was a Rav in Miami Beach, Rabbi Weberman. Shlomi Friedman is married to one of his daughters. Yeah, about Shuva by the name of Yaakov Goldstein. And his wedding was the night after Birkas Hacham. Hat been gebeten by Rebbe. He was about Shuva from Florida. Hat Chassan mit der Beidl from Florida. Can the Kvutze schon bleiben? So the Kvutze should stay for that night. Dat is dan zurückgehen, noch Birkas Hacham at 3 o'clock. The Rebbe said stay. Okay. After Birkas Hacham, we knew Yaakov Goldstein's parents, the Floridians. For our people, they were at Birkas Hacham, it was over their head. The ganze Meise was over their head. The whole Crown Heights was over their head. There was 3 Chassanim to get the Siddur after Mincha. One of them was that night as well, and one of them was an out of town and getting married the next time. So what did the Rebbe do? The 3 Chassanim stood, the parents stood behind her. I wasn't there. We were with the Rebbe by Mincha, when the Rebbe came out. But basically we heard that the Rebbe asked in Yiddish, it was a dark kohen. There was no kohen. It's the Levi. There was a Levi. The Rebbe gave to the Levi and then said to the Levi, "Der up noch der was es hat gedinne in Chassan." Yaakov Goldstein was going to get it the next. And then the Rebbe, with no translation in English, the Rebbe gave a bracha to all 3 together. We're at Mincha with the Rebbe. And nach Mincha was Tumbach. We sit in the 770. The 6th was supposed. The Yeoman Klein, 3:45, comes running into the 770 and says, "Are the shluchim, any shluchim of Miami?" So I was sitting there with Shmuley Posner. Yeah. The Rebbe wants Yaakov Goldstein in his spirit. No cell phones. There's nothing. I said, where are we supposed to find Yaakov Goldstein in his spirit? He feels it. So the 3 of us go running down Kingston Avenue. helft der Eibishter, that Yaakov Goldstein decided to make a kapota by Yisrael Shem Tov. And if you make a kapota by Yisrael Shem Tov, the buttons are being sewed on an hour before Kabbalah Spun. So we're running up and down, and Yisrael Shem Tov's door is open, and we're shining the Shigoy. Anybody see Goldstein? Anybody see Yaakov Goldstein? He's sitting with his parents by Yisrael Shem Tov on the bottom of Kingston Avenue. Uzi had me Mishayim. So they come out. What do you want? I say, drop the kapota. Did I ever want you? So we go running up Kingston Avenue. We should go. And we come there, and the Yeoman opens up Ganei Natach. And me and another guy said, oh, no, ich hab sich hereingehabt, and I went up the steps to the second floor. And by the time the label came in, he didn't notice us, because if he would have noticed us, he would have thrown us out on our heads. But he didn't notice us. And he looked at Goldstein and his parents and said, stand here. And the Rebbe came out with his own siddur and an unbelievable, beautiful English. The Rebbe says, looking at the parents, I don't think you understood what took place before. I didn't, God forbid me, to not give your son the siddur. But I don't think you understood. But I just went by the order of a priest, a Levite, and an Israelite. And there was a Levite, the Rebbe says. So I gave it to him. But I don't want you to have, and the Rebbe says, with the shmeichel in Yiddish, kein Farbrengen. And he looks at Yaakov, he says, translate it to your parents. So Yaakov says to his parents, he doesn't want you to think that he doesn't want you to be upset with him. The parents didn't know. They were clueless. They didn't know what's going on there. And the Rebbe is talking to them. The Rebbe says, I hope you forgive me. And me, I'm sitting, ich gucke von Rebbe, push it besser. Sitzt im besser. Bei die Idola. They had no idea. And the Rebbe then turns to Yaakov Goldstein, hands him the siddur, and says, in English, no more Yiddish, because it's my personal siddur. I have papers, the Rebbe says, tucked inside. I didn't take them out. Please ignore them and don't lose them. And if I can ask of you, the Rebbe says, please stand here and daven, and when you finish, knock on my door. We didn't want to move because Label Groner didn't move out of Ganei Natach throughout this guy's davening. So we didn't even move. So we stood there like not making a sound. And I'll never forget the parents stood there. They were like lost, how they were being asked for forgiveness. They had no idea. Oh, but the Rebbe's able. Took our time. We should go find Yaakov Goldstein, get him with his parents. The Rebbe should ask forgiveness. That chas v'sholem et sich nicht vercheckt. It was like, to me, it was like you couldn't witness something as holy as that. The edelkeit from the Rebbe to ask. And then when they knocked on the door, the Rebbe came to the door. The Rebbe took back the siddur, and the Rebbe then bent around Yaakov Goldstein. And the parents were standing there. The Rebbe says, I hope you have a beautiful night and enjoy the wedding. And Mazel Tov. And the Rebbe closed the door. I don't know if it became Bagreif in the Reichkeit. The depth of what Pshat Navish Yisroel. What's Pshat Navish Yisroel? Yid, das the ganze Welt liegt auf seinem Kopf. Tracht, if the parents, the Chlal had no idea what was going on. Like they had no clue. The ganze Tag, they had no clue. They went from Birkas Hachama, stell sich vor, a freie Jid steht bei Birkas Hachama. They don't know what's going on by Birkas Hachama. As a Meise besteht dort, dachten, der Rebbe sagt, was sicher, mit dachten, sie sind die Guten. They didn't know what was going on. And we stood with them. I didn't have a chance to do translation for them. Things were moving. The Rebbe sagt, das sicher, then we sagt, the Alter Rebbe is it was like, and then the Rebbe goes back in, and it was these people was zeicher to an unbelievable ava from the Rebbe. The Shidduch things I could get at the end. They lived in Eretz Yisrael and Shidduch. But anyways, it was to me. I was a 21-year-old boy to see the Rebbe as so a rock trocken. Und reinlegen sich nach zweites. I never said I asked forgiveness. It was like my heart. Here the Rebbe say those words. I asked forgiveness, and you shouldn't have faribel. It's a chinuch in Avish Yisrael. It was a chinuch. Anyways, that night at the Chasana, with getrunken mashke, like, you know, and Avramo Korf came in for the wedding, and Label Shapiro came in for the wedding. They came in for Birkas Hachama. With getrunken mashke, with Zelta Meise, and with Hazei. So Rabbi had Ibn Chazet, it was a gewaltige word from Rabbi, like Bal Nigla, Rabbi. He was out of Rosh Hashiva for 3 years. He doesn't remember it because I tried to remind him, and he said, "Okay, I don't remember." Rabbi had verbracht, but it erzählt. Rabbi Shapiro hat erzählt, as by the Gro pressed away on Chalamoy. Only a Lubavitch and Rosh Hashiva. I'm not going to tell him mice from the Gro. But I believe a Gro pressed away on Chalamoy Sukkos. But man nicht gekannt on his spade. Chalamoy. Hat man by the Shloshim Masber given the Gro. So Rabbi says, they did a spade. They eulogized the Gra at the Shloshim. His main Talmud was Rab Chaim Volozhin. Was it when Rab Chaim Volozhin is Hesped? So Rabbi says Rab Chaim Volozhin is Hesped is given as Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai passed away. Amud Hayamin, Patish HaChazak, Amud Hayamin. The Talmidim cried, why? Was wennst du? Du musst doch Amud Hayamin. Sagt Rab Chaim Volozhin, was ist die Reichkeit von Amud Hayamin? Was haben wir? So Rashi sagt, Amud Hayamin geht auf die Amudim in the Beis Hamikdash. Wie hat Rab Chaim Volozhin translate Amud Hayamin? He says that when you, on Simchas Torah, when you do Hagbeh, the whole Gevil is on the left. But Bereshis, the whole, I'm sorry, when you do Hagbeh on Simchas, no, when you start Bereshis, the whole Gevil is on the right, is on the left. But when you're Messiah the Torah, the whole Gevil is on the right. Amud Hayamin, a bucky in the God's Torah. That was the big thing of Rabbi as Mola the Godish God's Torah, Amud Hayamin, at the ganze Gevil, is heeft recht te zijn. Was sagt der Alte Rebbe in Shvat in Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, when the Talmidim gewinnt? Der Alte Rebbe sagt Shvat, eine Idee, as the Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai says, in the Eilom von Yediyah, the consciousness of the person, weiß ich wer ich bin. Aber if the Darge von eine Idee, the Darge von der Neshama, Heche von Seichel, sagt Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, I don't know, I don't know. Auf kein Lojner gerät zu der Seichel, der Alter Rebbe gerät zu der Neshama. Aber ich sage der Neshama, aber Beineni weiß nicht, wo der Neshama steht. Eine Idee, der Darge von Hecher, in der Darge, was ist Hecher, von Idee, hat Rabbi Yochanan gesagt, I don't know, ich weiß nicht. Der Chaim Velosh nicht getan hat, als der Reichkeit ist, wegen Idee. Sagt Rabbi, kommt der Rebbe, in der Meime, wo ich hier mich kehle. And he says, the Rebbe sagt, Pshat neine Idee. Was sagt der Rebbe, Pshat neine Idee? Eine Idee, Pshat sagt der Rebbe. As Rabbi Yochanan Zakai, his entire life was for another person. Bechlal nicht getracht wegen sie. And on his deathbed, he said, eine Idee. Now, ich darf trachten wegen sie. I never thought about myself. Mein ganzer Metzies, das war eine Zeit. That's how the Rebbe says, Pshat, like die Mishkele. It's nicht wegen ein Koyach Agvul, it's nicht wegen, it's not about your belief, wo deine Neshama, es ist that's all selfish talk, by the way. You talk about Ligvul, dein level of Neshama, you talk about Yidiyah, it's out wegen sich. Hier Chareis. I watched the Rebbe. Poshit, it was about another person. He took out time to Poshit, sit with another person. Und allein legen sich nach Zweiten. What did the Goldsteins think when their son wasn't handed a sitter by him? The Rebbe's doing this for years. That he gives it to one chassid and then he passes it on. But the Rebbe turned around and thought and said to himself, oh, but these people have no idea what I'm doing. Ich will das sagen. The Rosh Yeshiva, I'm listen, he's my boss tonight. I'm gonna do it. L'chaim, let me sing out the next thing. L'chaim. I'm doing the same thing. Rosh Hashiva wants me to tell a story, but before I want to tell the story of Rosh Hashiva, I think once I say the story of Rosh Hashiva, it's going to disappear. So I got to figure out how to do this right. You know? How do I keep him sitting in the room? For the Rosh Hashiva, you know what I mean? L'chaim. Rabbi Hef. Still a L'chaim. Rabbi Kalmanson, they say L'chaim with me? No, it's an empty cup. It's an empty cup. L'chaim. When I was a bocher, one of the Reiche Tziyurim that used to roll to 770 was a Yid, was in Reuven Dud. Reiche Tziyur. He's a Reiche Tziyur for multiple reasons. First of all, his language was right. His language was something spectacular. We will not. His discussions to the Rebbe, his relationship with the Rebbe was unmatched. His way of expressing an idea was a farmer's way of expressing an idea. But once you got past it, the ideas that he said was phenomenal. You just had to get through the sprach, you had to get through a lot of obstacles. But he had a certain connection to the Rebbe that was insane. It was insane. I mean, I was a 19, 20-year-old bracha sitting with him. He was crazy to listen to him. His love for the Rebbe was palpable. It was this, like you speak about your parents. The same language you speak about your parents. It was. So anyways, we schlepped them up to my dormitory. Shvat. He came in for Shvat, Tavshin Lamed Tes. And we schlepped them up to my dormitory. And the night before the Rebbe's Farbrengen. And he wouldn't start speaking before he was a zaftige chevre. So he drank like 2-3 cups just to get the Farbrengen going. And then once he got the Farbrengen going. So he says like this. It says in Tavshin Chof Aleph, 1961, at Simchas Torah, this is what he tells us. Simchas Torah, he's at the Rebbe's Simchas Torah, and the Rebbe would come down after that kofis the second night and teach a nigun. And the nigun the Rebbe taught was Anim Zmiris. And the Rebbe introduced the niggin of animus midas with a maisa. What's the maisa? It's given a yid. There was a Jew that by Tzoy and Kippur, as he's folding up his talus, he started to sing animus midas. And the next thing he knew was in the morning. And then the Rebbe taught the niggin animus midas. You know the niggin? Animus midas. That's the niggin the Rebbe taught. After the Rebbe taught the niggin, Reuben says he walked around 770 and asked everybody, "Did you ever hear the story?" Reuben says he walked around. He asked Rabbi. He went to Farbrengen. Hast du mal gehört the meisten von a Yid, from a Jew, on Mitzvah and Kippur, was versinkt in the niggin? No one ever heard the story. Anyway, 3 nights later, Reuben says, I go into Yechidus. He's leaving. He comes into Yechidus. Okay. He goes into Yechidus. This is that's all my mindset. He goes into Yechidus. And then in the Yechidus, he says to the Rebbe, the Maisa was to the Zel to introduce the Animus Midas. I asked by everybody, did they ever hear the story? And no one heard the story. So he says to the Rebbe, Mistama, that happened with you. What happened with you? So the Rebbe says, if dir passed, that for you it fits. Out was gezorgd happened with me. Well, the Rebbe said to him, it didn't happen. The Rebbe started to tell him, as a given a year before this man had Baal Shem Tov. Lived before the Baal Shem Tov's time, his mitzvah was Pidyon Shvuyim. Pidyon Shvuyim. No? Redeeming captives, the Puritzes, the Russian landowners used to take Yidden and throw them in prison. They didn't pay on time. This Yid owned a big business of the lumber, and he made money. He was a wealthy Jew. The Rebbe tells Reuben that he used to take his meiser money, his tithing, and pigeon shvur. By here, this Yid ends up in a city that is a Yid in prison for 12 years. And the Poritz was asking for an amount of money that the Yid made a cheshbon that the only way he can pay for this guy is if he sells his business. He sells his business. So he went home to his wife. The Rebbe was telling Reuben Dudi. So he went home to his wife, and the wife said, "This is your business. If this is your business, do it." So he sold his business. He took the money, went to that town, redeemed the Jew from came home. He was an Orim man. He was poor. And no one allowed him to get back on his feet because they were nervous. Can't let this guy back on his feet. He'll buy them out. So they kept him in a state of poverty. He had a cholim. And in the cholim, they came to him, they said to him, they want to repay you for the mitzvah. You have two options. Option number one is they'll make you a Gvir again. They'll make you a wealthy man. Option number two is they'll give you a taste of Gan Eden in Olam Hazeh. In this world, you have an opportunity to have a taste of Gan Eden. And the Yid in the Cholim said, I want to taste the Gan Eden.
That's like you.
Huh?
That's like the attitude.
He wants to taste the Gan Eden. But here, Yoin, Meitzoi, Kippur, he's folding his talus. Fängt an singen an his midis, and all of a sudden, that taste of Gan Eden kicked in. And it's a verzinkt till the morning. That's the story. The Rebbe says to Reuben Dunin. Reuben Dunin hears a story. The Rebbe says to Reuben Dunin, so what's the bochein of the story? What's the hero from the Meister? What's the punchline? So Reuben Dunin looks at the Rebbe and says, a Yid had an opportunity to have a taste of Gan Eden in this world. So the Rebbe says to Reuben, that's the punchline? Or this is the Ubergehen from the ganze Meiser? So Reuben says, yeah, but that's the whole story. The Rebbe says, befeinish nicht. The punchline is that the story happened before the Baal Shem Tov. Weil noch der Baal Shem Tov, the Rebbe says, wollte Yid verstanden, die Yid would understood, the ganze Kavona is dole matter. The whole Kavona is more doing for the Eibush the dole matter. And he would have asked for all his money back. That he can continue to do mitzvahs in this world. Before the Baal Shem Tov, hat man sich eingeredet, man hat Malachim in him. Reuben said, the Rebbe said it to him with such a force. And he was pounding on the table. That the whole Kavona, the story, the Rebbe says, you go out, you tell the story, the Kavona, the punchline of the story is, it happened before the Baal Shem Tov. He says, the Rebbe, I beg by the Rebbe, I don't want to be a driver on the farm anymore. The Rebbe said, I want you to stay on the farm. Why? When you'll affect more Yidden there than sitting in yeshiva and learn. He says, the Rebbe was guiding me that way, and I begin to understand the punchline of the story. I remember Reuven one time said to the Rebbe, "Ich hab dir lieb. I like you." So the Rebbe smiled to him. The Rebbe said, "Das redt die Neshama, das redt die Kuf." Is it? Are you speaking because you're Neshama or your body? So the Rebbe, Reuven said to the Rebbe, "Ich weiß mechanisch was meine Neshama is." He says to the Rebbe, "I don't know what a Neshama is." The Rebbe says, David Hansen tells an unbelievable story. David Hansen says he's standing in 770 and he sees the Rebbe walk in and the Rebbe is laughing. Rebbe laughed. And the Rebbe's like he's laughing. And the Rebbe is like in a state of like happiness. See, David says as soon as the Rebbe walked in, he ran out. What happened? He comes out, Reuben Dunin is there. So he says to Reuben, what just happened? So Reuben says, this is in the morning. The Rebbe's coming to Shachas. Reuben says, the Rebbe came up, and the Rebbe asked me, did I have a coffee, did I eat something before Shachas? So I said to the Rebbe, of course, sicher. So the Rebbe said to me, du sagst the Rebbe's? Are you saying the truth? So he looked at the Rebbe and says, I feel the Eibishter. Ein Sach was ich like this to do. Not even to the Eibishter. One thing I don't lie to is to you. And the Rebbe walked into the room, and as the Rebbe walked and said to the Rebbe, the Rebbe went such a smile, it's a laugh. Reuben said to the Rebbe, they're going to Eibishter Reis. But to you, he says, to be Kimmel Nishvat. Reuben Dunin said, but the Rebbe walked into 770. The laughing to himself, like in a state of simcha. And David Hansen saw this. He didn't understand. He wasn't on the other side of the door. He didn't see it. So he ran out. So that done. Right. He wasn't even. He didn't leave. So he never studied. That was a sense. Never lie. All right. The Rosh Yeshiva is not going to let me live if I don't tell the story, so I'm going to tell the story. No, but it's not. This wasn't like I'm entertaining. Okay. So I made a dick mice. I got married in Memdalit, other Memdalit. Like Baim in Memdalit, I was very close to the Hechts because JJ and Peretz Hecht lived around the corner in East Farbrengen. And I grew up with JJ's kids and with Peretz Hecht's kids. We were Yedidei Nefesh. Unbelievable. All of Peretz's children, all of JJ's kids. So Shimon Hecht and JJ on the morning of Lag BaOmer, they came over to me and said, Alti, can you do us? They were finding it very hard to find people to stand by the Rebbe's house. Because no one wanted to be at the Rebbe's house when the Rebbe comes out to the Lag BaOmer parade, because you'll never get a place at the Lag BaOmer parade if you're at the house. But they needed people at the house. Why do they need people at the house? And they definitely needed married people. Why they definitely need married people? There's an Indian in Chabad Chassidus that Lag BaOmer is an opportunity to ask for children. People that have no children, to ask for children. So there was women and men lined up in front of the Rebbe's door of his house as he comes out to go to the Lag BaOmer parade. Poshit crying and betting sich by the Rebbe for children. So they didn't want Bachram. It's not serious. They wanted married people there. Who wanted to be there if the Rebbe is going to leaves there, then goes to the parade, and you'll never get, you miss the parade basically. Because to help the Rebbe get down the stairs, to help the Rebbe get in the car, to make sure you're protecting that they're not touching the Rebbe. You needed 5-6 guys to push it be there. And they couldn't get people. Who wanted to be at the Rebbe's house when the Rebbe's got half an hour later going to be on the podium in front of them? I said, the heck with it, I'm going to do it. I'm not a starker, I said to him, I'm not a starker guy. I mean, I'll stand by the door and open the Rebbe's door and close the car. I'll take the least job that you have of, Fesca. Just get the Rebbe in the car. Let other people, as the Rebbe's walking down, I can't even tell you to see it. I'm telling you, it's Himmel Geshrei Tzir. It's a tzir, it's Himmel Geshrei. You have men and women all crazy. It wasn't just Lubavitch. It's Litvishes and Freien, and they're screaming at the Rebbe, nay. And some of the Rebbe is answering, some of the Rebbe is not answering. It's heartless. And they want to make sure the Rebbe answers, so they're pushing. It's not. I'll tell you something. My heart was like, so Yuta pulls up the car on the gutter. I go to my job. That when the Rebbe comes down the stairs to get the door open, that Yuta can go around and close the door. I thought I had the easiest job in the world. The 5-6 other guys that had to encircle the Rebbe, that as the Rebbe walks down from his house, down the walkway, down the stairs, along the sidewalk, that people should be touching him and allowing him to walk. They had a tough job. Because without exaggeration, over 100 people were pushing. Anyways, it took the Rebbe. With that, I'm not being Megazi. 7-8 minutes to come back. They didn't let the Rebbe move. People were pushing, screaming names and crying. Bet Lachem, Leah Basora, Akakin. Your heart was bleeding. And the Rebbe was walking with his eyes half closed. Anyways, the Rebbe comes finally to the door, which was not an easy job because everybody was pushing at the door for the list to get their names in before the door gets closed. I'm pushing the door. Yudel's going around to the front of the car. The Rebbe bends down, gets into the car, and then he slides himself into the center of the car, away from the door. I'm about to get the door closed, and this guy, don't ask me how he did it, up over the door, his head, he was like this, his feet hanging here, his head here, and the Rebbe's door's here. And his head's there, and he says to the Rebbe a name, his wife's name. And he says to the Rebbe, the Rebbe says, oh my. The Rebbe says, Zog on me. She says, on me. And as he's trying to get himself out, the Rebbe looks at him and says, Zog nachamo. She says again on me. And I help him push him. We locked eyes together. I push him, I help the guy. He shouldn't be cutting hair. I helped the guy get his body out of the door. And he stood up, and I got the door closed, and I got him straightened out, and he put on a strangle. And we looked at each other eye to eye. And he said, thank you to me. I missed the whole Lagbaim. I ended up standing at the corner of Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn. Couldn't get any closer. There was buses, and there was things, and there was police, and there was barricades. I stood there, and I tried to hit it at the Sikha. I missed the Lagbaim prayer. My father passed away Nun Ches. Chavdalad Og Nun Ches is Yom Levis. He was born on Chavdalad Og. It was Shnas Avelis. And I decided I'm going in for his Yom Levis. It was a Friday morning. I said, I'll daven at the oil. I'll come early, 7 o'clock, 6:30. I'll leave Lexington at 3 in the morning. Get there at 6, 7 in the morning. Get in the mikveh. I'll go to mikveh. I'll daven shachris, and I'll go to the oil. I go to mikveh, Fisher's mikveh. And I come into the oil at 7 o'clock. I'm preparing for Shach. This Yid sits down across me, and he's looking at me, he's staring at me. I steek the cook with him. He made me totally uncomfortable. So I said to him, I want to daven shachas for a minyan. He says, okay. He says, okay. And he says to me, do you recognize me? I said, no. See, he points by the cookies and the tea. Stehen zwei Bocherwach. He says, you see those two? The twins. I said, okay. He says, you don't recognize me? I said, no. He says, do you remember Lagbaim Memdal? I said, yeah. I said, yeah. He says, I was the guy in the car, upside down, that you helped me get out from the door. He says, do you remember that the Rebbe said, Zog Omen Sveimo? These are my two omens. That's the stuff. Those are two omens. This is Nun Ches. I totally, like from Mem Dalet to Nun Ches, I was in Sarasota. I was in the Valgitz. You know, my father was passed away. My Koppishing was in 100 different places. He changed those, so his everyone ganz weiß. I didn't recognize him. He recognized me. When I asked him to double with my minion, he recognized my voice. He says, you're the guy. He says, that's the two woman. I said, what are you doing here 7 o'clock in the morning? He says, I'm on my way up to Monroe, Georgia. He says, Erev Shabbos, before I go to Monroe, Okay. Beautiful thing was again. Fine. So I want to continue down the path of the Rebbe's Abbas Yisrael. I want to tell you, I don't think you guys have ever heard this, so you can listen to this for a moment. I want Rosh Yeshiva as well to absorb this, because it's not a Pashut to Mice. Fight for a Pashut to Mice. I just can't overtalk people, so I'll wait. I'm just being careful to talk over people. By us in Boston, one of the Orthodox synagogues has a Rav by the name of Gershon Siegel. Temple, it's an Orthodox temple called Temple Bethel. Gershon Siegel is an Aiden by Aaron Soloveitchik. Aaron Soloveitchik is his Shvat. When Gershon Siegel's daughter got married, I was invited to the wedding and ended up sitting next to his brother-in-law, Moshe Soloveitchik, Aaron Soloveitchik's son. And sitting at the table, he told a mice. When I repeated the story at a different location, someone said to me, it's printed in Halprin from Par Chabad, Avram Dov Halprin, one of his svarim of Yechidus. I don't have a svarim, so I couldn't tell you. But I heard it from Moshe Soloveitchik, Aaron's son. Aaron Soloveitchik came to be Menachem Ovel the Rebbe when the Rebbetzin passed away. Memches. And when he went by the Rebbe, he wanted to be mechazik the Rebbe. He wanted to give encouragement to the Rebbe. He said to the Rebbe, the Zayda, Delvel of Bris. It wasn't a Zayda, it was his great uncle. The Gris. Not of Arab. No, it was an uncle. No. The Gris was the brother of Moshe. Moshe was the father of Aaron. The Gris. The Gris was the brother of Moshe. Moshe was the parents of Aaron and Yoshefet. says, ich will chazna a word from Greek to the Rebbe. The murder the Kemaisa with Zebin and the Greece. But it's a different story. Aaron Salvation says to the Rebbe, quotes a Gemara. Kol hamisabu al Yerushalayim zeicha liris b'vinyon now. Whoever will mourn Jerusalem will merit in its construction. It's a shredded Gemara. Because for 2,000 years, we're misabu al Yerushalayim. And for 2,000 years, who was zeicha b'vinyon now? What's up the Gemara? So Reva Mefarshim, the Sfasemis, the Gro, you go down the Mefarshim, Alz of the Shat, not just Zeichen now. You Zeichen lost of it. The Loshna Gemara is Zeichen, not Yiske. Okay. Hosta Shaila. The Gemara says Zeichen. And Reva Mefarshim tides, that should be Yiske. Future, not present. Because present is a shaila. For 2,000 years, people have been doing Tisha B'Avs, and they weren't zeicher b'vinyaneh. They didn't merit to see it being built. Sei chsidische, sei litvische, they all teach it futuristic. That you ultimately, in the Messianic era, you'll merit. Kumt Rabbi Sal basically walks by the Rebbe, he says to the Rebbe, so wissen sein, he says to the Rebbe, but Velvo gesagt, Zeiche kipschuta. Frank Shilas, he said. Oh, but mit Zeiche sein. He was trying to give the Rebbe. The Rebbe looked at him. The Rebbe said, I'm a teitche, beitscheit from Zeiche to Zeiche. Kol am a sabo belosh yochid, aber Zeiche. As durch dein Arbeiter, you'll bring other people along. Nicht Zeiche, beloschen Yochid, the Rebbe said. So my bite is Zeiche. In other words, the Rebbe is saying, if you're ready, listen to the Rebbe. To the Rebbe, it wasn't just about your individual merit. I.e., does something, you're schlepping people with. The Rebbe says, Beiching to Zeichem, the Rebbe says. Kol ha-mesabel's washing yochid. An individual's mesabel. Aber durch your aveda, Zeichem. You have the ability to schlep people with you. Don't think as an individual. Don't think about yourself. Spontaneously. The Rebbe turned to him and said, if you're ready with this Gemara, if you're difficult with the Lashem, it's by change to Zeichen. The Rebbe was uncomfortable with the Gemara saying Zeichen belongs to Yochid. Some might say that a person does something without Zeichen. Zeichen. The Rebbe didn't change the beginning. Hamis ablim. That it should be a plural Avelis. No, the Avelis should do by yourself. Oh, but through your own Aveda, Zeichen. Schlep along. I remember, I'll never forget it. When I was a Shliach in London and Gimel, there was this professor. His name was Cyril Dunn. English professor. He was a professor in London College in mathematical science. And in Mem Gimel, when we were shluchim in '83, he was taken to New Zealand. You know, colleges swap professors and they become scholar in residence for 6 months. This Fruma Yid was schlepped to New Zealand. What's in New Zealand? You can't have shchita in New Zealand. The Shliach that's in New Zealand today just moved out to New Zealand. Mitlamo, this Shliach sitting in New Zealand with little Kinderlach and come to get a chicken for himself was sharing it with Cyril Duck. and Cyril Dom's wife. I forgot his name.
Cohen?
No, Perth. Not in New Zealand, Perth. Not in Perth, Australia, Perth. Yeah, Perth. Got the name. Anyways, Cyril Dom, after half a year, comes back and he writes a letter to the Rebbe, and the letter to the Rebbe initially starts out with full of praise. Shvach v'hidom. That thank God there was a Shliach there, and I witnessed how he shared with me his food. And in Perth, you can't do shchita. And to get a kosher chicken into Perth, not an easy thing. But the Shliach shared everything. So Lachatchila wrote the letter, and he was standing and telling it to came to the yeshiva and told everybody. And he was praising. But then he says, the second part of the letter, he went after the letter. How you talking? How do you take a young couple with little children, you're stuck in chiddush, there's no chiddush, there's no food, there's no fruit, you throw them to Perth, Australia, they have nobody to talk to, they have nothing, there's no meaning, there's nothing. How do you take the charayas? How do you take the responsibility? On your shoulders, he says. And he writes sharp to the letter. That's the second part of the letter. He got no answer. Garnished. The Rebbe, like, not to the first part, not to the second part. It goes 6 months go by, garnished. The Rebbe, like, the cop out, he says to himself, maybe I did wrong here. He starts speaking to my shver, it wasn't my shver then, to Nachman Sudak and to Shmulu. They say to him, what kind of chutzpah do you have to judge the Rebbe? He comes as a chutzpah, a young man, writes to the Rebbe. And then they start, he felt terrible. Hat angeschrieben, a Michtov Mechil. A whole letter. Why he said it and where it came from, but now he realizes his mistake and he understands the greatness of the Rebbe and he versteht that he had no right to say it. And a ganze Michtov. And he writes on the bottom that I'm asking for the Rebbe Mechil. I'm asking for the Rebbe Mechil. Yaman Klein calls him up 4 months after he wrote the letter. Yaman says to him like this, I want to tell you, he says, I'm going to tell you what the Rebbe answered you, but I want to tell you how the answer came. He says the Rebbe ripped the entire letter apart and threw it out. And just the bottom piece, where he puts his name, the Rebbe writes the second letter. The Rebbe, the whole and the Rebbe writes, Ma ubechein ma yiyelaso. From your whole mechil. What's going to be about another person? Because of that, are you going to do something for somebody? Then I want to hear. The ganze Meise, you're asking me mechil, I don't want to hear that person. Well, das ist nicht. Ubechein ma yiyelaso. Ask it, I'll see. But Biyama says, I didn't explain you. The whole first part of the letter, the Rebbe ripped it off and threw it away. Just the bottom part with your name on it. The Rebbe wrote, Ubochein, ma yiyeh by the Geil Hashem. It's narishkeit. It's all nourish. To the Rebbe, it was all about Ubochein, ma yiyeh by the Geil Hashem. You're going to start asking me, no, thing not against. I don't have time for that. You're going to enjoy this. I do so good. Turn off this thing. Can we turn this off?
It's a dirt speed style.
Turn it off. Good. It's 11:30. I will show you to the holidays. Let's turn it off.
Soon. Barry's in time.
Toshli Bay, Camp Morgan Avron. There was only one overnight camp. There was two.
Top right corner.
The two camps that were overnight camps, because no time is so. What were the two camps? What were the two camps? What were the two camps? There was Camp Monk and there was Camp Morgan Avron. Those are the two camps. Morgan Avron wrote called up Chabad and said they want to dedicate a Shabbos to Chassidim. With two Chassidic Shliachim come up to camp. So Yale wasn't married. It was a boys' camp. And my father was married. So Chadakov approached my father and Rabbi and said, go up to camp, we're going to run for Shabbos. Okay. They go for Shabbos to camp, we're going to run. They say they give them as Freitag by Nacht. Freitag by Nacht geht's einer Freitag by Nacht geht's einer Farbrengen. No one's officially talking at the Sudas of Farbrengen. Shabbos, zwischen Shachris and Musa, the Rosh Yeshiva is getting ready. The Rosh Yeshiva for Torah V'das is going to. Shabbos by lunch, my father's going to. Rabbi will get ready to Shabbos. Shabbos morning, the Rosh Yeshiva starts to work ready. And this is Bach. He's a 50-year-old kid, 70-year-old kid. Ein dovische ve'erve pochus b'Shabbos. A ganze Tug. What's shot as ein dovische ve'erve pochus b'Shabbos? My father's looking 15-year-old kid. Shabbos morning. The Shmenish wenig mit auf Hell, na Tug. If ein dovische ve'erve pochus b'Shabbos. Und es befällt von der ganzen Meise mit der Rief. Meise, von was ein dovische. And he got a little graphic because we got, it's 8 was. And my father said, this is Shabbos. And I said, for 8 forever, no, it's coming his time to speak Shabbos. I said, mach Kiddush in Mashke. Mach Kiddush in Mashke. And it's weggestopped. And my father, the whole drosh on Bay of Echo is the mother. Evet. Echo, and maybe back to Meir. As Meir is in the Naad, Bisnish, Meir Echo. My father said, what's Meir Echo? My father explained that in the Meir Shlemus of the person. I'm a break that I'm the Echo. I'm a break that I'm the Echo. As a wegen the English in the devils to do. As a Nord Meyers, your own Shlemus. My father was going back to Rosh Yeshiva. So I'm gestellt machen a proof. That's my Narrigkeit. What's the wegen the English to do? Rosh Yeshiva, good verstand. As he just got delivered out touch in Poland. And not the Yelke has it at my Rosh Yeshiva didn't come. It's a Shabbos, the Rosh Yeshiva called up Chadakov and said, suddenly somebody was Mevaish in front of my tummy. By the way, we never heard the story. My father never told it. Yoel at Shiva told the story. He says, Chadakov told it about Sunday. They came back Sunday. And Monday morning, you have to daven. You have to kiss Torah. My father was a kiss Torah, and they never called my father into kiss Torah. I have to get into Kaneda. And the Rebbe said to my father, it's past. He's the Rosh Yeshiva of his children. And you said to my father, it's the high elder. And they said to my father, so stop king, go back up to king. Zet zich aan weg zitten. Een bed bij je begin. My father, the pure Kabbalah sales, did me hard. So looked at the Rebbe and started to back away. And as the Rebbe walked into walked into his room. Before he closed the door, he looked at my father and said, "Oh, it's so good," and closed the door. It's good. The Rebbe had an unbelievable. It's how so you can't insult somebody. You gotta do the right thing. You know, you gotta do it the right way. You can't do it the wrong way. But at the same time, my father said he was like, "I get krogen a patch." Well, after he got the patch, he krogen like left different fun. Yeah. He said Mendel Drizzen drove him to Morgan. But the Drizzen had one of the only Bochum that had cars was Mendel Drizzen. Mendel Drizzen used to take whatever to the oil. So that told Mendel Drizzen to take my father back up to Morgan Davron. My father sat to Rosh Yeshiva. And by the way, the Rosh Yeshiva said to my father, he said to my father, "You're right. It wasn't the right subject. On a Shabbos morning, ain't Dov Shibba ever, Pochas Mishnah. There's stuck in Pesach Zeit. So then, on a Shabbos morning, it's a Boch. Because ain't Dov Shibba ever, Pochas Mishnah. This is Pasha. What's with our head in Shabbos in the fleet? Rabbi says, Years later, I'm talking about 30 years later, I took my father to Lakewood for Shiva. And it was a family that lost a father. And the wife never got a get. She didn't live with this man for 40 years. And he didn't give her a get. But the children were sitting in Shiva in Lakewood for the father. And the Rebbe, by the way, started encourage my father. My father came to the Shiva, and the wife, but the Fedish didn't want to sit Shiva. She never got a get for it. That Rosh Yeshiva was there. And he listened to what my father said. My father, this lady turned to my father, asked my father, my father said, Shiva is an infant head. You don't have a head? Don't sit. The Rosh Yeshiva get tiny. Shnei Kotler came in. Shnei Kotler said you should sit Shiva. So the lady said, Rabbi Bukiet said, I don't have to sit Shiva. He says, I disagree with him. Who is he? So she said, she said, he's my rabbi from East Farbrengen. He said, I don't care where he's a rabbi from. He's wrong. The lady says, I'm not sitting Shiva. This is the lady. So Shnei Kotler said to the children, your mother is wrong. She has to sit Shiva. By then, my father left. Shnei Kotler was mezalzel my father. Because he found out he's a Lubavitch. He said he's an ignorant man. Doesn't know how long. He has to sit Shiva. He felt bad, Shnei Kotler. He picked up the phone and called Moshe Feinstein. Yes, Moshe. Didn't tell him names. Yes, the Shliach. A man that didn't give a get to his wife for 35 years. The children are sitting Shiva. Does she have to sit Shiva? Moshe Feinstein said, it's a totally beheaded. And Moshe Feinstein says, it's a totally beheaded that if a Talmud wants to sit Shiva for a rabbi, he's allowed to. It's a kocha totally beheaded the other way as well. So he felt bad. So he found out my father's gone. We called up my father. He says, we almost not. That's not better. He's out to the rabbi. My father had no idea. He says to him, I don't know you will resolve for me. So he says, aber die Engel ist Hogget. Dort aber der Ölum. Aber der Ölum, mein Sohn. So he asked him. So anyways, my father said to him, I didn't know what the mocker is, my father said, but I saw the way his arms. And if presented that she's entirely different from this person. So he says to my father, interessant. This is like, he says, I don't know what now wrote. He says to my father, what did you tell me to have? I'm a couple of information. What's it together for Tommy Behead? It's a nice thought. My father says something like that. It's on the shomer mice. It's like a headache. In the shomers, this is push it to the mention. Couldn't. So anyway, my father wrote the whole thing into the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said to my father that Tzarech kama v'kama basis kedei lahasbir ha'inyan k'diboy. You gotta find language. As gefinnen basis. I see schon. Tzarech is a kama v'kama basis kedei lahasbir. Find the language. My father sat down with Carson. I'm finding he says, it wasn't an easy story. When did I hear the whole story? Very interesting. I'll tell you when I heard the whole story. When Pekarsky, the Rosh Hashiva, went by the Rebbe, Memches, available. The Rebbe asked the Pekarsky to stay after Mail. And on the staircase that the Rebbe went upstairs, the Rebbe asked Pekarsky a child. Child the Rebbe asked Pekarsky was, well, I don't even know if the lottery repeats. Because my father sat with Pekarsky. Rebbe asked Pekarsky a child as Mahotnish Kinder. Und der Weib ist weg, ist noch halb an. Als je doch Kinder, is da the ene Platz, that I'm a kasha to this to the shall show. If your whole connection begin the vibe. So because he said to Rebbe, Zich. Ich will mal mit dir. Don't say Zich. Ich will mal mit dir. He never produced it. He said to my father, huh? Never did bank. Expect the Rebbe to be done. But the Rebbe still wanted. And the Rebbe one time on the way to he was down in the shackles by the Rebbe in the house. And the Rebbe was going to the oil, and on the way out, he was standing outside. The Rebbe looked at him and the Rebbe said to him, the house. He never produced it. He never produced it. And then was this whole thing of hemp. So I remember my father talking about it, says, I never produced that. Like I can. It's a nice thing. It's a nice thing. If you know, you find them different places. Okay, Chevro L'chaim. The Rosh Hashiva is still sitting here, shocked. Oh, nicht getrunken kein Maß. I want to tell you something. Ich habe mal verbracht with his brother. And I went to visit in Bruwan. And mit verbracht, and at me gesagt ab Schattag geworden, was Ada Jönes mit verbracht, it was a Farbrengen. And if even has it abroad, I has it over the Shvat talking about. As the Rebbe said, as the Alter Rebbe saw, as the Brunis, as Rabbi, as so that up. wie sagt man, Flug, aber voll, like it's like a separate group. I said all about it. See, this Chabad is like found Israel. I said something. And I said to his parents, I said, his brother, I said, so I looked at something about Rebbe in I told him from Tanya down, the Rebbe says that as right Tanya for people giving me Wasser, von seinen Bühnen, ungeschrieben Wasser. Und ich, and also at the moment, Eretz Yisrael. Mit der Mode auf Rebbe, fängt uns sagen, als hat mit seiner Stadt und mit seinem Ziel. Und noch damit er mal wartet allein. So I said, Rebbe, he says to me, so geschmack. It wasn't to me. It's on the screen. It goes back to 50 years of my friend. Exakt der Gemara. Kufay on the bay. The Gemara read as a ton from bubble is coming to Israel and they ate the chicken. Was bekocht in Israel. If the kochen a chicken, bis the chicken is geworden ein Chicken. Und der Tanne von Buffalo get the ganze Sache. Das ist that's what you serve people. A chicken which is entirely disintegrated into liquid. Und der Tanne von Buffalo ist da. Sagt der Tanne von Israel, that when ich gegangen in Buffalo, they served me moldy cheese. You know what they serve me in Buffalo? Moldy cheese. And from the molds on the hook of the time. He said the bottom was that shop is Kufay with Bay. If I remember my 50 years ago, I think he said Kufay with Bay. It's like the bottom was that shop. Satan know him then, ain't it insane? Like an essence. The essence from Bovel, the essence from Yerushalayim. The ganze Sache. Stellt sich a Beck's problem. He says, as in Eretz Yisrael, the Kedusha Kishan is the Gashmis in the bottom Bovel. In Golas is fruit, is from the that the sour, the moldy cheese, that a double mic. Say, but the shop. Say, but you can talk the yard. Socked out to them and that double to as ich bin nicht kennen mehr Pflege, als ich gehe noch ready to the russischen. See this guy that led to the chicken that from tomato and to the yogurt. Very small. Okay, if that and the next you're talking to a certain type. That's the it stops. No one paid it. Am I okay? Can I? Do you want me to keep on sitting here? Hey. I knew you were about it. Without question. Your memory is better than mine. L'chaim. I kept it simple. When you put a Rosh Hashiva next to you, I leave him that way. So you should never let him sit next to you. Hi. So I want to tell you, first of all, Rabbi Hecht's not. The Rosh Hashiva is left for the night, so I can't make him crazy. I don't know who I can make crazy now exactly. Who wants to sit next to me that I can drive crazy for the next
Oh, he said today's Yom Tov and the Spain.
You know, the one of the most intriguing things of the whole Rebbe's Messias was a pragmatic thing, which the Rebbe translated into fundamental ideas in Jewish theology. The pragmatic thing was that the Rebbe was a Nasi in the Makos. In America, 1950, the greatest years of democracy. The Rebbe watched how Russia, how communism fell. The Rebbe watched Germany fall. The Rebbe's leadership was built in democracy. The Rebbe translated that into a whole theological understanding. And in the last Maimah that the Rebbe gave out to us, the Rebbe translated on King Chochmas. The Rebbe put it out. And the Rebbe did a monumental piece of work on differentiating the past generations, in particular his Shmer, which lived under communism and lived under Nazism, to himself. And the Rebbe found language, unbelievable language, on a spiritual level to identify the uniqueness of his leadership without speaking about himself. So I want to tell you something. I heard this from Elter Chassidim, and then I spoke to grandchildren and children, and they authenticated it. In Tufshin Bays, 1942, Yossel Goldstein, Uncle Yossi, was single. He was a bacha. The storyteller. All the tapes. He was a bacha. And the Friedrich Rebbe on Rosh Hashanah, it was 1941, because Tufshin Bays and the English dates it was 1941. Friedrich Rebbe came down to daven the first night Maidav, and those that know the history of the Friedrich Rebbe, the first night Rosh Hashanah, the Stille Shemoneh, the individual Shemoneh of the Friedrich Rebbe, of the Yochid, the Friedrich Rebbe stood and davened for 3 hours. The Rebbe used to stand next to him. People went home, made kiddush, ate with their families, and came back to 770 that the Friedrich Rebbe should have a minyan to the Chazor, the continuation after the Shemoneh. But the Friedrich Rebbe stood 3 hours Shemoneh. The thread, the amount of tears that poured that first night of the Friedrich. It was my father, who was married then with children. He said he would go home and come back. The Friedrich Rebbe stood 3-4 hours Shemoneh. 1942, the Friedrich Rebbe stood Shemoneh, and after the Friedrich Rebbe went upstairs, the Friedrich Rebbe's wife came downstairs and bumped into Yossel Goldstein and said to Yossel Goldstein, collect all the machzors and clean the room, that it should be ready for Shachris in the morning. Simple. Yossel Goldstein ran to the stender where the Friedrich Rebbe davened, but the Friedrich Rebbe left his machzor there and grabbed it and put it under his arm, and he cleaned up the whole room. And then he opened up the Friedrich Rebbe's machzor. Now the Friedrich Rebbe's machzor opened up to the beginning of Shemoneh Esrei. Why? Because the page was so soaked in tears that it was deformed. So the machzor opened up to that page. On the other side of the page of where the machzor opened up is the end of the Manosseh. Umachuse b'rotzin kibu alei Moshe v'nei Yisrael. The words of Machuse b'rotzin kibu alei, translation, that they accepted God's yoke with free will. The Friedrich Rebbe put a pencil through it. 1942. Holocaust was raging. Communism was raging. The Rebbe, Friedrich Rebbe put a pencil to it. And as he's looking at that, he's like, who walks in? The Rebbe. Who's the Rebbe? He sees Yossel Goldstein standing and staring at a machzor. It's like he So he goes over to Yossel Goldstein and says to him, what are you looking at? So Yossel Goldstein says to the Rebbe, I'm holding the Finik Rebbe's machzor, and look, is that not the Finik Rebbe's ksav yad? The Rebbe looks at the Rebbe says, can I look at it? The Rebbe takes a look at it. The Rebbe says, yeah. Closes the machzor, tucks it under his arm, and says, John. And he also goes and said he never saw that machzor again. That machzor he never saw again. But he said,
a line through it or a line under
a
it?
line through it.
As if
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what shot?
I'm
Not under. Through it.
Through it.
Oh,
Wie kennst du sagen about Hussein Brotz and people are laying as communism is raging and this barf Yidden are lying in gas chambers? We talked about Hussein Brotz.
The line was on the word
That's
itself. On the word itself.
Yeah. And that's why they never took it away. I want to tell you something. Amolek Chassidim. I want to sagen der Pshat, and I want to tell you a heritage from a chassid that had the ability to go beyond. Amolek Chassidim, like the Taichan, I say, all these holy Jews from the Rafinik Rebbe's time. You know what you say? Oh, man, before Sheikh Hanad Morin, huh? If he shot to Sreimon, over 6 Sadikim to Spore, over Sheikh Hasid to Skadosh, over Keref Kedeshim to Sal. It's like the Taichan Azay. If he shot to Spore, he shot him the opposite. Over 6 Sadikim, is Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah, the one Sadikim. Over Sheikh Hasidim, Moshe. Ubekenev Kedeshim? Finik Rebbe. Because the Finik Rebbe was Yesidas Nefesh with Kedeshim. And they like Taichan Abed Doskate Kumen. That's it. The punchline of Golas is Bekenev Kedeshim. Standen a edel Yid. They used to say this Machaya the Rebbe. Standen a Yid. Tell you the name in 2 seconds. He said, don't stop there. Go to the next one. There's going to be a Jew that's going to collect everybody. That's the punchline. This Jew that said that, they all looked at him. Go to the next line. That's the punchline. That same Jew, listen to me for 2 seconds. That same Jew never went up to the Sudas. The Rebbe used to sit at the Suda upstairs on the 3rd floor from Tov Shin Aleph. This tough second floor. This tough Shin Lamed Aleph. This Asana B'Teis. Lamed Aleph. So his mother was one. They sat every young kid upstairs. It's given Ayid. Alam geschlagen sich allein. Everybody fought to go in. There was one Jew who said, I'm not going in. And they begged by him to go in. And he said, I can't be at a Suda. I can't be in a place where the Rebbe doesn't sit at the head of the table.
But the head was what? The head was the
Rebbe. And this Eid was a chassid of the Rebbe, the Fidik Rebbe. He was a menayel ruchni in a tvotz, b'chayim the Fidik Rebbe. This same Eid turned around and said to these chassidim, said, don't stop ubekerev kedeshim. That's the punchline. Don't stop ubekerev kedeshim. Go to the next line. where there's a Jew who has the opportunity to collect everybody. His name is Rabbi Mentor. He was a holy Jew. I want to tell you the something about it. I want to tell you an unbelievable thing. But say l'chaim. Why don't you say l'chaim? Your cups are empty, but I'm out there. Say l'chaim. Ay, 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 on the highway. Don't bother anybody. So I want to tell you like this: I'm ready to get my skashis of a chosn. You got to hear this. Lamed Ches Shmini Atzeres night. I was 18 years old. I was actually 17 years old, and the whole thing went choderon. The whole 770 in the fourth hakafa, everything turned upside down. They were throwing people out. I was thrown out. But I was all nervous about my father because my father came to the Akofis already. I thought my head was like spinning. Where is he going to end up? Like throwing people out of 770. My father had a heart condition. So I'm running around looking for my father. And I'm begging, and I see Benjamin Klein is running in and out of 770 to the sukkah. I come, I pushed, I said, Benjamin, is my father upstairs? He says, nobody's upstairs. I said, would you have a hasaga where my father would be? She says, I don't know where your father is. He says, but I know that a bunch of guys went to Mentlich's house. Mentlich lived on top of Raskin's, the fish market. What a delicious place to live. Reach nichoyach, 24 hours a day. You don't smell it. And mice and cockroaches, you name it, what was going on. The guy didn't paint the wall in his house. The guy didn't change cardboard. It was like the stove and the oven, the house was a shrek. So he says to me, so I go running to Mentlik's house. It's not the first time I was in Mentlik's house. I've been there frequently because he was a good friend of my father. And whenever he had plumbing problems, the toilet was stuffed, he would call my father as if my father was a plumber. And my father would leave the yeshiva in his briefcase, he would put a plunger in it. And he would go to plunge out Mentlik's toilets. That was his job, that was his. I Mentlik asked him to plunge his toilets. He plunged his toilets. My mother used to go crazy because she used to come back with the plunger back in the briefcase. Die stunken von aller Seiten, and he's walking around with the briefcase with the plunger. But this is it wasn't his fault. The whole plumbing in that building was problematic. I don't know how they lived it because the odor was. Anyway, I go up to his house. These were holy Jews. These were like holy Jews. You don't make people like this today. You just don't make people like this today. I come up to his place, and my father sitting there, Mentlik sitting there, Mendel Tenenbaum was sitting there, Moshe Pinchas Kat, the whole Polish gang is sitting there. And Mentlik wasn't a drinker, but they would drink. It was a crazy night. And the way they were dulling their pain was through alcohol. They had no other way of dealing with the pain. You have to understand these people. These people are the durchgelebte Friedrich Rebbe's person. The durchgelebte Friedrich Rebbe's Yisudim. And now, here we go again. It was like, they couldn't, how much could they be saving? That now this Rebbe is going through something of that. Mentally, never took much. He never used to. To my wedding, Mentlik said to my father, before my father flew, and I went over with my father to Mentlik, and Mentlik said to my father, drink. I beg by you. Don't drink at the wedding. Go to London. I don't drink this Chaimeir. This is like two Chaimeir speaking to each other. My father looked at him and says, I'll tell you what, ich will aufhören trinken when you stop. Tell me when you're starting and I'll stop. That's all he says. You stop and I'll stop. When you start, I'll stop. He says, well, let's have a deal. Beide nicht trinken, he says. But Mentlik is Zoklachai, and he was crying. He says, Ich darf bete mechillet for them. This was on his head. He was so nervous they won't have an opportunity to ask mechillet for them. And I'm a 17-year-old kid, and my father had a cup in front of him. I kept on changing the cup to soda that he shouldn't drink. And this is a game I was playing the whole night with him, swapping cups over here. And I'm listening to Mentlik. And Mentlik's my Rosh Hashiva, and he's crying. And he's crying. Finally, Mendel Tenenbaum blows up. Says, Genukshe mit Mechila. Was das denn mit Mechila? He says, you're going to cry the whole night about Mechila? What? She says, Samaisif and Tovshin Yudala for 1951. So my father says, you're carrying something for 1951? He says, yeah. I made a mistake in 1951 and I never rectified it. I want to cry when I think about just remembering the seer of Mentlik. He starts saying like this. He says, in Tafshir Aleph, he says, a couple months after the Rebbe became Nasi, the Rebbe was Farbrengen. And he says, it was upstairs. How many people were there? 100 people, 150 people. What was the whole Crown Heights? Says a friend of Yid came in because Crown Heights was a frumme, it had frumme kreis in there. And he was in the back of the room. And during one of the Nigudim, the Rebbe pointed at him that he should come and take l'chaim. The Rebbe wanted to give him l'chaim. But the room was full. So the Yid pointed to the head of the table. Send it to me. Like, you know what I mean? Pass the l'chaim down. And Mentik said, he says, I screamed. As the Alter Rebbe the Alter Rebbe was sitting here, would you say pass it down? Or was it gekommen? Does it Alter Rebbe? That's what Mentik said to the Yid. The Rebbe said to Mentik, sta 2 days in the Kaab. And I'm not going to do a translation, this great mystical language. Sta 2 days in the Kaab. So a Kaab Yosha or the Ketote. Nekuda. There's a direct connection where it's one line and it's connected, and therefore, or yes, it's a continuation, but it's broken up. And he says, I translated it. Ad Rebbe is speaking negative about himself. That I'm not a Kav Yosef from the Alter Rebbe, I don't sit down to them. Like I said. And the Rebbe was saying, it's Nekuda, and they ever stop the Alter Rebbe matters. So don't compare me to the Alter Rebbe. And as if the Alter Rebbe was saying something derogatory, or he says, "Ich habe gelebt azay fayor." And I gotta ask Mechila. I don't know about that part. I didn't get that part. I'm telling you what I heard from him. And then Gevaint. I'm telling you what he said. I'm just telling you what he said. He didn't chaz that part. He chazed this part. And then he said, what I heard from him, he cried, I need yes mechila. The punkt verkehrt. The Rebbe is the kuda. The Rebbe's Metzius is größer. Eibus HaKav Yoshe kennen nicht ein größer. The greater point is in the beginning. When you do a Kav Yosher, is where it starts from is aggressively the place where it reaches. But if it's Nekuda, that Nekuda, it can be even greater than where the Nekuda starts from. He says, for years I translated it in a negative way. As the Milas go Kav Yosher. He says, no, the Rebbe said Nekuda, and he wasn't putting himself down. And gesagt the Rebbe. And was the Rebbe too tough? None of the Rabbi. I have this with him. Says and he was nervous against the a Maisa from Toshi Yirawa. He was crying about it in Lamed Ches. He said, no, he was on Chabura, and he was drunk. He was teaching. I could drink myself. The dedication between these guys were like palpable. They were going through a cathartic thing. They were going through. They never were threatened like this. Like right in the Rebbe's mitzvah, into lava class. The mitamol, the haksham of the reality of God was taking hold. They didn't see that by the Rebbe. And it brought back to the memory. That scared them. Scared them. They push it was shame.
Go out, let me do it.
Anyway. Rabbi, Farbrengen them out. Drank. He stood there. But then after the whole thing was over, he collapsed. No, he was not. Rabbi, so, it was good sitting with you guys. I feel it in Yontif, everybody. Discuss this to the Rebbe to the end, my friend. Without limitations. L'chaim, Rebbe.
What is it?
All right, I can drive. No, I'm good. I got a hotel room. I'm good.
Yeah, the most successful Farbrengen gosh, we remember the last bunch of rounds. Held a crowd long time and it's quieter than the recent Farbrengen. So come back soon.
No. All right. You send me the information. Will these be fun? Will these be fun?